You're going to be speaking or hearing from all three members of the Sea Change staff. I am the Director of Operations for Sea Change. You'll be hearing also from the Institute Director, as well as a little bit from our new Program Associate, Erin Kahn. Erin, you want to stand up and wave? I just want to thank Erin for all of her logistical work as well. Thank you, Erin. Yay. We're also so relieved to have help. For a very long time, Sea Change was me with Shirley. So now it's nice to have other people working on it as well. As Shirley was alluding to, Sea Change is, even if I talk about awards quite a bit, Sea Change is much, much more than awards or recognition for your efforts. It is an institute, a repository of information. It is a community. All of those things together. Oh, look, the P moved. I was like member shy. These things together will entail what you'll get from a Sea Change membership. So it's not just the ability to apply for the awards, and the awards are mostly what I'm going to talk about right now, just to give you an idea of what we mean by self-assessment and action planning. But really, what is Sea Change? It took yesterday's advisory council meeting for me to step back and think, what is Sea Change? It is not just awards. It is not just a recognition system. What it is an opportunity to stand up as a member of a global higher education community. It's not just national, it's international. And commit to shifting the culture of academia to one that is actually truly inclusive, equitable, and diverse. One of the things that we ask when you become a member of Sea Change, when you've done your membership, you are publicly committing to a set of principles. We've put a copy of the set of principles in the shared Dropbox, but it's also readily available on our website. But I think that this encapsulates kind of what all of those principles are. I won't list them all here for you because you can read them. But you're publicly committing to a set of principles that are based on the idea that we all know that bias, marginalization, and exclusion have prevented the full engagement of a broad range of individuals. We need that broad range of individuals to maximize creativity and quality. We also have allowed this bias and marginalization to prevent the full engagement of the promise of available talent in STEM education and careers. So we're doing a disservice to ourselves as well as a disservice to the populations that we cater to. So I'm going to be talking to you about awards now. That's what everybody always wants to hear about, awards. Well, I happen to think that they're very cool. And that is the main thing that when we were licensing from Advance HE, the Equality Charters process, that was the main thing that we were really thinking about at first. Part of this is self-assessment, right? So what is the self-assessment process when we're talking about that? It is finding your information and your data, and then finding what information and data you do not have, and developing a plan to close that gap. It's looking not only at numbers, but at policies, procedures, leadership, climate and culture, programs, processes, it's the whole shebang. And after that is a holistic assessment. How are you going to produce an environment that is more conducive to true equity and inclusion? So as they say in the UK, this is not a box-ticking exercise. I don't know how many of you have experienced this, but you get a new equity diversity office on campus, and it's staffed with one, maybe two people, and then it's not given any funding or any clout, but it looks great to say we have an office of diversity, right? That's when we say box-ticking exercise, that's what we're talking about, and that's what we're trying to avoid. So I think a lot of times this process seems intimidating. Don't let it be intimidating. As Shirley was saying, it takes a lever in order to make this change. You need to look at things holistically. We've tried to make this as flexible as possible to accommodate you where you are in your current context. Each institution is different. We try to promote awareness and then linking that awareness to understanding so that you can then take appropriate action. But then importantly, it's reflection on those actions and how those actions are working. Are they the appropriate actions? Is the hypothesis we had about why we were seeing some sort of inequity the right hypothesis? All of this you can think of as just a big social experiment, but it's a social experiment for good. And then if something's not working, or lo and behold, you implement something and it's actually making things worse, which happens, then you need to go back and say, all right, our hypothesis about that was incorrect, just like we do any time in STEM. How are we going to modify this to make it work? So the awards have 3 different levels, bronze, silver, and gold. And these are standardized across all of our international partnerships, which is great because then we can start to eventually compare globally, how are we doing in terms of equity. For a bronze award, you don't need to solve basically anything. And in fact, it takes a really long time to solve anything. So what a bronze award does is recognize an institution for thorough self-assessment with qualitative and quantitative analyses, the identification of key issues, a prioritization of those issues, and then actions put in place to address them and carry the institution forward. So truly, you can get a bronze award for, we did the self-assessment, we looked at everything holistically, here are the 4 or 5 areas we really need to focus on. They're not good, here's why we know they're not good, but here's this action plan that we've put in place in order to get us to a better place within the next 5 years. So do you need to fix anything? No. You just need to be on the right road to actually making the culture more normative. In order to progress to a silver award, surprise, you get to do all of the same things that you did for bronze, but you also need to demonstrate that there is an impact from the previous activity that you had put in place in your silver action plan. And then you extend the action plan to continue progress. Even if you just get a bronze renewal over and over and over again for 15, 20 years, because that's where your institution started, each time you renew, you're making a little bit more progress and you're making your action plan a little bit more solid. So we've set this up so that you should be able to eventually get to silver and gold. Gold, I believe that there is one, I don't think there is a UK institution that has gold yet, and they started in 2005, right? So change takes time, that's my main message. Gold is you're doing everything silver does, but you're also serving as a beacon for the sector. And what that means is if you're an institution, you've started a regional network of other institutions that are working on sea change applications. Or you've got a really great promising practice. Like I always think of UMBC's program, Meyerhoff Scholars, right? That is a prime example of being a beacon of the sector. They have gone to other institutions and said, this is what our program does, this is how we think you can modify it for your institution, and then it's been implemented at other places. So that's a prime example of what that would entail. Right now, obviously, we're still in the pilot, believe it or not. I feel like I've been talking about this forever, but it actually didn't officially launch until October of 2017. And we've only done 1 cohort of awards. And we haven't even formally launched our membership yet. So this is still a baby program, which is great because that means you can help us, and your input means a lot to us as we're revising what we're doing. So right now we're piloting just the bronze level award. In a couple of years, we will release information that will help institutions get to a silver award. As Shirley was talking about before, this is both a top-down and a bottom-up approach. So what we're talking about today is institutional level, that's the top down. And it's important to make the institutional policies kind of adapt so that departments can do the work that they need to do. And they also have administrators at the high levels that are very understanding of kind of what's trying to be done. The departmental award is really where a lot of the deep dive happens with the student populations, graduate students and undergrads. But obviously faculty are also a very important part of that as well. Because as Shirley also alluded to, a lot of the campus climate and culture is really departmental climate and culture, just expanded outwards. I know that I look at the numbers that our international partners have to work with of institutions of higher education, and I get a little sad, just thinking of administrative burden internally. So if you've got about 100 institutions that have an institutional award in the UK at any given time, and you have 700-ish departments that have an institutional award at any given time, and then you think about the fact that we have about 3,500 institutions, really, when we include 4-year and 2-year, which we do want to include them. And then if you multiply that, that's over 22,000 different departmental applications. That's one of the main reasons that we're working with the disciplinary societies and trying to form coalitions and allow them the flexibility of addressing departmental issues that are specific to their field, as well as asking them to help us with some of the, I hate saying administrative burden, but the things that it's going to take in order to assess these awards, do the peer review process, give the awards. And so that's still in the making. There will be, there's one society coalition that has formed, and they're planning on piloting departmental awards in physics and astronomy starting in fall of 2020. So it's happening, it's just a little slow, but we're slow and steady wins the race. Change is not done overnight. What are we trying to get you to see with this process of self-assessment and sea change? We want to see a shift in cultural norms. We want to see funding agencies, whether private or public, invest in places that have greater potential return on investment. So as Shirley was saying, why do you keep giving money to departments that are unhealthy? So you're giving a great deal of grant money to some of these labs and departments, and you're actually rewarding really bad behavior. And that's one of the reasons that, say, if there are known bad actors and everybody knows it, but nobody actually calls it out, and they're bringing in $2 to $3 million every 3 years, that's one of the reasons that I think institutions hesitate to remove that person from the culture. We want to see good behavior and better science, because we know that good behavior does actually make for better science. Because if you have an environment that is more conducive to true equity, diversity, and inclusion, you get better work done, you have more diverse perspectives, it's more innovative, and as Sarah was alluding to in the UK, it's actually brought in more grant funding dollars, probably because their ideas are more innovative. The application process, I know a lot of people really want to know the details of how this application works. Our pledge to Sea Change members is that we will provide you with guidance, feedback, and any kind of Q&A that you need for your self-assessment process. We will manage the peer review of any applications. We will provide you feedback on applications regardless of the outcome of the award. So even if you don't get the award, you will still get feedback that tells you what is great, what are good practices that you're doing, and then what the peer reviewers recommend that you do moving forward. We're also going to keep all of this confidential. So a lot of places are very concerned that this will be airing their dirty laundry. But as Shirley always says, it's better that you look at and examine and explore your dirty laundry before someone else reveals it for you, right? It is what it is. One thing that we won't do is rank. So this is something that really rankles me. It's a terrible joke. I understand why people in STEM like numbers, and they like to then be able to rank based on numbers. Like, I like quantitative things too. A, that's not gonna help us, and B, it doesn't tell you anything, right? What even are you ranking? So this is ratings, right? And as Shirley said, we eventually love all of these institutions to get gold. This is not a zero-sum game. The more people that are doing this, the better that our sector will be. Another thing that we won't do, though, is read your application before you submit it. So we'll provide you with all of the guidance that you could possibly ask for, but I'm also not going to sit there and read through your application and be like, good, I give your draft an A, and then have it go in front of peer reviewers who are more filled with expertise than I am, and then have you not get an award. We also don't provide legal advice to institutions. So there are a lot of components of what we're offering where it's, hey, you should consider these things with your general counsel. So we don't want you to mistake that as legal advice. Like, we do have a legal expert that works with us, but we are not legal experts. So the idea here is to provide you with the documentation and the guidance that you need in order to address legal sustainability of programs, and make sure that you're setting yourself up for success. But, you know, if you call us, we're not as cool. Like, AGU has a really cool thing now where they've got like a free hotline you can call if you've got an issue with sexual harassment or gender harassment and you really feel like you want to pursue it. It's free legal advice if you pick up the phone. We don't have that. I don't know how they managed to do that, but I think it's amazing. This is a heavy lift, right? All of the interventions that we've done, all of the small programs that we've done, surely would not still be working on the same things 40 years later if what we had been doing previously had been working, right? So it's time to step back and start addressing everything from a holistic way. However, we want you to use existing data, existing analyses, existing programs that you already do, right? So if you've actually gotten an advance grant in previous years and you have some data that was associated with that, use that. Anything that you collect for affirmative action that you need to report on, use that. We're intentionally aligning ourselves with the Association of Public and Land Granting Universities. They have an Aspire alliance. It includes alliance, yes? Yeah. Part of that is something called institutional change or iChange. We very, very intentionally are cross-referencing materials and trying to make it so that if you are an institution that's in APLU and you do get into iChange, that process is going to set you up for, at the end of iChange, you should be able to submit very easily an award for a bronze. We're intentionally aligned with Advance. Any other of the kind of equity-related programs in NSF, we work closely with NIH as well. Check in with your institutional research office. And also, you have data everywhere, and most people don't talk to one another about your data. So put out a call to all of the super data nerds that are in your institution and get everybody in one room and talk about what systems you have, what information are you already collecting, what information are you not collecting that you think maybe you do want to collect. Make it nerdy, make a task force that's just, where's all our stuff? Talk to your general counsel. You're going to want to get them on board before you do this. You don't want to hand them an application and be like, is this cool to hand in? And they're going to just be like, nope. A, they're not going to know anything about what this process is. And B, if you engage them from the very beginning, they can help you phrase things in a way that is all very forward acting and will end up protecting the institution in the long run. You need to get buy-in from leadership. It's even better if it's at the top. It's even better if it's the top of a system. So the University of California system, the president of that system wrote a letter of support for one of our first bronze awardees. So it wasn't just the institution, it's the entire system. They're like, this is important, we want to do this. Why is that important? Because that also means that there's going to be allocation of resources and there's going to be support as you do this work, because otherwise it's not going to happen. But also, incredibly importantly, get buy-in from faculty. Have faculty at the table from the very beginning. Have them on the self-assessment team. You need to get their perspective. Have a student if you feel like having a student perspective. And I'm going to talk to you way more in detail about creating a self-assessment team in a little bit, so I won't bore you with that now. I put this slide up here because, give me a minute. A lot of times, people are like, cool, we're going to do this. We're going to go for sea change. We're going to put together our bronze application. We're going to turn it in 2 months. No. And that's okay. But it's going to take you longer than that because, first of all, when you're doing a first-time bronze, you don't, as I said, you don't know where half of your information even is. So a lot of times, people don't open these materials until they get back to fall semester. I highly recommend that you don't do that. As I was saying before, legal guidance, critical, start with them early, avoid unnecessary exposure to risk, and then it's also important to know that we will have legal advice during our peer review, which is really great because, for instance, if there's something maybe you didn't mention in your application that is a restriction from your state, or, for instance, there's a mentoring program, but maybe you haven't documented it the right way to make sure that it's very obviously legally sustainable if somebody comes after you in court about that program. Our legal expert will be able to help the peer reviewers kind of with guidance and with feedback. The general expectations of this process are self-assessment of policies, procedures, and practices, the continual addressing of legal sustainability, the development of a smart action plan, and I'll talk to you a lot more about action planning later on in the afternoon. But most importantly, this is all very flexible so that you can include your rationale. So why did you assess something the way you assessed it? How did you interpret your findings, and why did you interpret them that way? How did you know that you've got a problem within your institution in chemistry with women of color? How did you know that? Demonstrate that. And then prioritization of actions. You can't do everything to address everything that you find in your first self-assessment. So it's better to pick maybe 4 or 5 things to focus on at first. And then when you go for a bronze renewal 5 years later, you can say, we've done this, look at the action, the progress we're making on this. Now it's time to address the next 5 things. What peer reviewers are looking for and what we're looking for is what I call the 30,000-foot view of the findings. So we ask a lot of very detailed, very specific questions in self-assessment. That's really for your internal use. We don't need to see all of everything that you did. We do not need a data dump. The awareness component of this paradigm is, first of all, including the right people on your self-assessment team. And we'll talk about that. Who do you include and why do you include them? Identify what you don't know. There's going to be a lot that you don't know. That's okay. Because then you can create a plan with actions that address each one of the criteria in the application. Document your data gaps. Document why you want to try to fill them quickly or not. So an example that I always give is, say you're like, wow, we don't really collect any information about people with disabilities on our campus in any of the communities, so faculty through student. One of the actions in your action plan can be, how do we decide whether or not we even want to collect that information? What's the best way to collect that information? Will collecting that information make people feel safe or not? That can be an action that takes you up to 5 years. Do we want to know this information? How is it going to help us if we do know this information? And then what's the best way to get it? Conveying understanding, again, not a data dump. You need to tell a story. You're providing meaning that you've gleaned from your self-assessment. Go beyond the surface level descriptions of the information that you found and identify the root cause of inequities identified in analysis. And it may be that you go into the research and you find out that we don't actually have a clue why we're having problems with retention of faculty of color in this particular field. So if you go into there and you say, well, we don't actually know what the basis of that is, that's fine. Just put that into your application and then put in an action that's like, we'll try to figure out more about this. For action planning, be forward-looking, be evidence-based, and be smart. I think I'll tell you what SMART means later, but I think almost everybody knows what SMART means, right? Great, I'm just kidding. So it is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound or time-honored. And I'll talk to you again much more about that in the future. And then reflection and repetition, repeat that process. That comes later on in this process. So after you have done your action planning, you've been implementing it for maybe a year or two, it's really time to sit back, reflect on what you're seeing, and see if you need to make some changes. Numbers alone are not sufficient for quantitative data. We really just want to see what's essential. We want you to include intersectionality. That's actually really hard to do while also avoiding personally identifiable information. You can do it though, and we do give you advice on how to do it. Talk to your institutional research board. See if you can get one of them on your self-assessment team. And then for benchmarking, if you don't have much data, you've just got maybe 3 years worth of stuff, you can use public data sets for comparison to benchmark yourself as well. So read, ask, repeat is what I say. Review the handbook, criteria and guidelines, and the review rubric. C-Change staff will be speaking with you if you put in a letter of intent. We will be like, hello, when do you want to schedule your monthly calls with us? You get to see our lovely faces once a month. But then importantly, talk to other institutions. So again, this is not a zero-sum game. Don't be afraid of airing your dirty laundry. Everyone has the same dirty laundry that you do. Surprise. So talk to the other institutions and work with them as you're putting together your action plan. So what's new in this? What did we learn from our first cohort? What we learned is that our handbook was all over the place and a bit sloppy. I'm not gonna lie. I can say that because I wrote it. So we split it up into a handbook and then criteria and guidelines. And I think it's a lot easier to kind of comprehend what we're looking for. We've split also things up into color boxes. How am I doing on time, Michael?
You're a little long.
Oh, cool. You should be like, hey, stand up. How long do I have?
I've got 15 minutes left in this portion.
Cool, that's cool. You don't need to talk about stuff, right? Yeah, I'll just keep talking, it's no problem. So what we do is we have made the criteria and guidelines. We've tried to be very specific about what the review criteria are that the peer reviewers will be looking at. Guidelines is what should your internal self-assessment look at? What questions should you ask yourself? But including in the application is just, okay, what's that 30,000-foot view of what we've found? Why did we decide to prioritize what we've decided to prioritize? Why are we not mentioning some of the things that maybe were in the self-assessment? And then we tried to flag areas where we were like, this is how you can retain confidentiality with your legal advisor. Here are our institutional bronze awardees. This is our first pilot cohort. We owe them a lot because that is the reason that we have redone all of our materials, is because we learned from them that how we were asking things was not the best way to ask for things. You guys can look at all of this later. That's in the criteria and guidelines, which I assume that all of you have read voraciously and read every night before bed. And just a little bit about peer review. We have an in-person panel of 6 or so individuals that represent a broad range of expertise. It's chaired by a volunteer and moderated by staff. They review each one of the sections, and then they provide a holistic recommendation. Do you recommend this application for a bronze or not? The final decision is by AAAS, but obviously we think the peer reviewers are spot on for most of the time. And I won't take any questions because I keep talking. So next, I'm going to invite up Michael and Aaron to talk a little bit about the Institute.
Woo! All right. Well, thank you, Beth. It's great to be able to be up here. As Beth mentioned, it was a one-person team last time, so it's exciting to be part of the team now. And it's just been fantastic working with Beth and Shirley and Aaron now on this project. But the idea, like we said, is we're here to serve you and help you meet the goals of your institution within the context of your institution. And really, Sea Change is meant to be larger than only the awards. We are really an institute, a community, and an awards process that is tied to a global effort. And so I'm going to do the Institute. That's as fancy as I get with technology. So the Institute's really our training, technical assistance center, and research repository. It will, and I say will, and this is one of the reasons we have a bit less time to talk about this. We are still building this out right now. But it will include online and face-to-face trainings, really be built to support our Sea Change members and their needs, and align to kind of what you want in terms of not only the content, but the format of the training as well. And the trainings will mostly be around best practices, policies, and programs in DEI, and they will be hosted by experts in the field, unless we're talking about the logistical webinars that we'll host around putting in an application or joining the community and using the community. Those will be the experts for. We're also developing a research repository that will link to the training courses and vice versa, so that when you're looking at research on specific types of tools or policies, you can also then look at our list of trainings that are related to those issues, potentially pick up more information once you feel grounded in the research. And it won't just be research, it'll also be case studies about what's working and why it's working. And we're also now developing summaries around specific issue areas, and looking forward to putting this all online in a really sleek, usable interface online. And so that's been an interesting process. You know, we started off by thinking, how do we actually prioritize this? We have probably 12 components to the application. We can't build out trainings for 12 components all at once. And this is where we started based on what we were hearing from the community, what we've heard from our applicants thus far, and what we've known internally. But we did go out and do a needs assessment to better ground ourselves really in what the community is looking for. We heard back from over 175 individuals and then followed up with 11 for interviews as well. We had a pretty diverse group responding, as you can see here, not just in terms of the individuals and who they are, but where they were from as well. You'll see here that the majority of folks are from R1 or R2 universities, with a smattering of folks from PUIs, nonprofits, and MSIs, and I'll get off the acronyms now. So the needs assessment also showed that the level that individuals sat within their institutions or within their organizations was varied as well, but with the majority of folks being faculty, and then or on a tenure or tenure track, and then the others kind of being in leadership was the other largest chunk. So that's who we heard from. I'm only going to focus on the results from 2 areas. These were the areas where our respondents felt they were the greatest barriers to making positive changes related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. You'll see here 5 areas related to institutional climate and culture. The 2 areas where our respondents felt there were the greatest barriers was related to faculty workload, which we've talked about a little bit already today. And then also kind of having role models and a diversity of individuals as faculty and leadership as well. The other place where we found our respondents saw a lot of issues and barriers related to diversity, equity, and inclusion was again an issue that was highlighted in Athena Swanen earlier today, was around the whole faculty recruitment, induction, retention, promotion. And so this is another area where it wasn't on our list initially where we think we need to focus. And I'm sure you've all heard quotes like this or issues like this come up or felt this yourself, but I did want to point out that we do have a lot of rich information from our respondents and from our interviewees about really what the nature of the culture feels like and then what that means to them and how it weighs on them day to day and over time. So, from that information, we've kind of added these issues into our priority list. And so we're just getting started in putting together a robust IT infrastructure that will allow us to manage these types of webinars, trainings, courses, and in-person interactions. We're hoping to have that up and running by the end of 2020 and fully functional early in 2021. One of the issues that we want to focus in on is related to diversity, equity, and inclusion and legal issues. We recently just started an update to our diversity and the law report, and so that will ground a lot of the work we're doing. If folks have questions about that, please come up and follow up with me later. I don't want to run too late on time here. And then also, to do the training and development, what we're going to start with first is obviously we're taping things like this, which can be used to recruit and provide information to individuals about what exactly Sea Change is. But then we're going to put together a steering committee to help us ground the work in really what's needed and to help have the community really inform that work. So we're looking to folks who are going to be active participants and engaged, and so we'll be pulling our list of folks that we'll contact from meetings like this. So we appreciate you coming, and we're hoping to start actually producing some of our trainings in the next 3 to 4 months and be able to roll out at least 1 new training a month once we are launched, but to have some there and ready to go. And so that's really what the Institute will encompass, along with the research repository, which I didn't speak much to. There's not many details there that are really worth spending time on right now. But next, what we'd love to do is just talk a little bit about the community. And so I'm going to invite my colleague Erin up.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Okay. So I'm going to let you know about what the community is or what we're envisioning it to be once we have this robust IT infrastructure in place. So with membership, you'll have access to the community. You'll be, as a member, placed in a community with other members, and awarded institutions or institutions who have bronze or higher eventually awards will also have a space within that community to interact with one another. But what's great about the community is we envision it having a broad membership as well. So you don't necessarily need to be an institution member. Anybody who creates a free AAAS ID can sign up to be a member of this community. Within the community, there will be a message board type functionality. We will be creating sub-communities, virtual communities of practice that can be grouped by discipline or subject, topic, issue, what have you. If there's a need that we have in our community, we can create that. And members will also be the first to know if we have in-person convenings such as this, or if we have public-facing trainings available. The other great thing about the community is that it will be moderated by volunteers. So if you would like to volunteer, you can let us know once this is in place, making the community a respectful and constructive place to have conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion in higher education. We also, in the meantime, have social media, which I'm running. So you can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And in the meantime, before we have this infrastructure in place, we can push our trainings to you through those platforms. Great.
Thank you.